You didn't click on this video by accident. Maybe it's 2 a.m. Maybe you've woken up again, breathless. Maybe you've seen the shadows. Maybe you've felt the silence growing heavier every night. Whatever brought you here, it's not noise. It's a signal. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop ignoring it. This isn't a video for entertainment. It's a mirror. So put your phone down beside you. Let this voice carry you into the places you've been avoiding. And if something in this message feels like it was written for you, subscribe. Turn on notifications, not for me, for you. So you don't miss the next time your body tries to speak again. And this channel becomes the only place that truly hears it. You don't know exactly when you cross the threshold between sleep and something else. It's never a moment you can track, like a clock ticking or a door creaking open. It begins subtly, perhaps with a strange awareness that your eyes are open, yet your surroundings are blurred. You attempt to move, to stretch, to turn your head just slightly to the side, and confirm that you've truly woken up. But nothing responds. Your limbs, once so obedient and instinctive, have become stone, heavy, useless. You try again, perhaps with more intention now. But still, your body lies there like a corpse, warm but unreachable. And it's in this void, this unbearable gap between consciousness and control, that panic begins to grow. Not like the panic of a car accident or a nightmare where you fall. Those are brief, sharp, and reactive. This panic is slower. It crawls through your chest, a cold, calculating thing. It sits with you. It waits. It builds, not just because you cannot move, but because something in you knows, with terrifying clarity, that you should be able to. And then, as if summoned by the sheer weight of your terror, you feel it, the presence. Not a shadow cast by logic, but a density in the room, a pressure on your chest, a sense that you are not alone, that some force, some entity is sharing your space. No, invading it. Your breathing shallows, your heart pounds, not because you're imagining danger, but because your primal brain, the one built for survival, is screaming warnings louder than any voice could. You're not dreaming. You're not asleep. And yet, you're not fully here either. This is the split, the fracture, the liminal space where your brain and body are no longer aligned, where one wakes while the other refuses. And it is in this fractured state that your most buried fears come crawling forward, not because you're hallucinating randomly, but because the walls of your mental prison have cracked just enough for everything you've ignored to leak through. Your mind, despite being awake, is drowning in a chemical storm. Neurotransmitters meant to protect you, like GABA and glycine, which paralyze the body during REM sleep to prevent you from acting out your dreams, are still firing, even though the dream has ended. Your muscles remain locked, trapped by biological safety mechanisms that have now become chains. And as you lie there, trapped in the stillness of your own body, your amygdala, the emotional center of fear, is lighting up like a wildfire, convinced you are under attack. And in a way, you are. Not by demons or spirits, although your subconscious may give them those shapes and names, but by yourself, by your mind, by everything you've shoved down, everything you didn't say, every panic you silenced with distraction. The human brain is not a machine that forgets. It stores, it processes, it waits for stillness, and when that stillness comes, in the dark, in the silence, in the minutes before waking, it opens the vault and lets the ghosts out. This is why sleep paralysis is not merely a fluke of biology. It is not just a broken switch or a bad dream with unfortunate timing. It is a symptom, a signal. It is your body and mind colliding in a moment of forced honesty. Your conscious brain is forced to sit with the raw, unfiltered data of your emotional state without the buffers of physical motion, distraction, or denial. You are shown the horror that lives behind your routines, and you are unable to escape it. Some would call it hallucination, some would call it spiritual attack, but no matter what name you give it, the experience is the same. You are no longer in control. And for most people, that is the most terrifying thing of all. Because control is the illusion that keeps us sane. It's what allows us to believe that we are not vulnerable, that we are not breaking, that our minds are ours alone and not subject to their own collapse. But in sleep paralysis, that illusion is stripped away. In the purest silence of the night, without movement or sound, the real truth is revealed. You are overwhelmed. You are holding on by threads, and your brain knows. It knows more than you admit. It has been screaming in dreams, whispering in exhaustion, aching in the space behind your eyes. And now, through the only language it can still speak, it paralyzes your body so that maybe, just maybe, you will finally listen. This is not just a terrifying experience. It is a window. It is a glimpse into your emotional nervous system, the part of you that doesn't care about politeness, productivity, or pretending you're fine. It cares about survival, and survival requires honesty. It requires acknowledgement. It requires that you see the storm you're living in, even if it means waking up inside it. So when you find yourself unable to move, unable to breathe, staring into the dark corner of your room where something seems to be watching you, don't just dismiss it as a glitch. Don't just label it a bad dream and roll over in denial, because what you're feeling in that moment, what you're enduring, is not just a malfunction of sleep. It is your mind's final attempt to show you something you've refused to face while awake. Sleep paralysis is not the enemy. It's the messenger. And the longer you ignore the message, the louder it will become. Until one day, you won't just wake up unable to move. You'll wake up and realize that the paralysis has spread silently into every part of your life. There are people who fall asleep as if the world disappears when their eyes close. They drift gently into unconsciousness, their breath soft, their muscles surrendering completely, their minds releasing control without resistance. For them, sleep is a return to safety, to balance, to silence. But then there are others, people like you, people who don't fall asleep. They collapse, not because they're relaxed, but because their system is exhausted, overrun, overstimulated, overwhelmed. People whose minds never truly shut down, even when the body begs for rest. Sleep, for these people, is not peace. It's surrender to something they never really trust. If you've experienced sleep paralysis, if you felt your body locked in place while your mind spirals into silent panic, it's not just a sleep disorder. It's not just a neurological hiccup or a temporary brain glitch. It's a system warning, a brutal signal that your body is running on emergency mode, constantly. And the worst part is, you didn't notice. You adapted to it. You normalized the tension in your chest, the racing thoughts, the inability to rest even in silence. You taught yourself to live with a nervous system stuck in fight or flight until it finally screamed so loudly that it invaded your sleep. Your nervous system, like every part of your body, is built for cycles. It's designed to move between tension and relaxation, action and restoration. But in modern life, those cycles are broken. You wake up with an alarm. You check your phone before your feet hit the ground. Your mind is already passing social pressure, financial stress, unresolved emotions. And this is all before breakfast. There is no stillness. There is no release. There is only the constant hum of alertness. Your brain has been trained to believe the world is dangerous, chaotic, and unpredictable. And when it believes that, it acts accordingly. The amygdala, that tiny almond-shaped mass deep in your brain, is responsible for detecting threats. It is ancient, primal, and unforgiving. It cannot tell the difference between an actual predator and an emotional wound. To the amygdala, a toxic text message or an unresolved memory from childhood is as dangerous as a tiger in the dark. And when it detects these threats, imagined or real, it activates your sympathetic nervous system. Heart rate increases, muscles tense, breath shortens. Cortisol floods your blood, And over time, you forget what it's like not to feel this way. So what does this have to do with sleep paralysis? Everything. Because sleep requires you to do something you've forgotten how to do. Let go. Let go of control. Let go of fear. Let go of the illusion that if you're not alert, something terrible will happen. But for a nervous system that never shuts off, letting go is interpreted as vulnerability. And vulnerability is interpreted as danger. So even as your body begins the process of rest, your mind resists, and that resistance can fracture the sleep process in subtle and horrifying ways. During REM sleep, your body is supposed to enter a state of temporary paralysis, a protective mechanism that keeps you from physically acting out your dreams. It's normal, it's healthy. But what happens when your mind refuses to fully disengage? What happens when your brain stays on alert even as the body sinks into paralysis? You become trapped, half awake, half asleep, unable to move, with a mind that believes it is under attack and a body that refuses to respond. This is the nightmare of the overactivated nervous system. You are living inside an alarm that never stops ringing, and the tragedy is, it has become your normal. You live with clenched teeth, tense shoulders, shallow breath. You scroll through chaos. You consume fear as entertainment. You avoid silence because in silence, the alarm becomes louder, so your nervous system keeps firing, and eventually it fires even in your sleep. Sleep paralysis is not a sleep issue. It is a waking issue that invades the night. It is your body's way of forcing you to confront the fact that you are not resting, not truly, that your survival mechanisms are eating you from the inside out, that you are constantly in defense mode, even when there is no enemy. And in the darkness of your bedroom, with no distractions left to numb the truth, your body shows you exactly how unsafe you feel. Frozen, breathless, voiceless, you might think you're just tired, that you're just going through a rough patch. But your nervous system knows better. It remembers every unresolved conflict, every suppressed panic, every time you forced yourself to keep going when what you really needed was to break down. It logs every fight, every shutdown, every moment of overstimulation, and then it speaks, not in words but in symptoms: heart palpitations, tight chest, insomnia, sleep paralysis. You don't need another motivational quote. You don't need a productivity hack. You need to recognize that your system is screaming, and it's been screaming for a long time. Sleep paralysis is not trying to scare you. It's trying to stop you. Stop the cycle. Stop the pressure. Stop the belief that if you rest, everything will fall apart. Because the truth is, you're already falling apart. Slowly, silently, in ways that only appear in the darkest hours of the night. Your body is begging for safety, for slowness, for stillness that isn't forced by exhaustion, but chosen out of care. But care is something you've forgotten how to give yourself. So the system takes over. It paralyzes you. It pulls you into a place where your conscious mind is forced to face what you've been hiding from. Not just the fear of sleep, but the fear of stillness. Not just the fear of nightmares, but the fear of yourself. Your nervous system isn't broken. It's protecting you. It's doing its best to keep you alive in a world that rarely lets you breathe. But even protection can become a prison when it never ends. And if your body keeps sounding the alarm, eventually you'll believe that danger is everywhere, even in your own bed. So if you wake up and cannot move, if you feel the terror rise in your chest as your breath sticks in your throat and the room presses in, know this: you are not weak. You are not broken. You are overloaded. And sleep paralysis is the smoke that rises when the engine starts to burn. Your healing won't come from fighting the paralysis. It will come from listening to it, from learning to turn off the system that's been running too long without rest, from remembering that peace is not the absence of fear, but the ability to sit in silence and still feel safe. Sleep, in its ideal form, is a return to neutrality, a biological surrender designed not only to regenerate the cells and restore energy, but to give your consciousness a break from itself. In a balanced system, sleep is where the body rebuilds, the mind reorders, and the nervous system recalibrates its settings, allowing you to wake up slightly more stable than when you closed your eyes. But what happens when your mind does not trust silence? What happens when rest becomes unsafe, and the very process meant to heal you begins to replicate the dynamics of war? You see, sleep is not simply the absence of wakefulness. It is a complex orchestration of neurological sequences that require precise timing, chemical regulation, and internal safety. The body must be willing to let go. The mind must lower its defenses. But when your body has become a battlefield, when your nervous system has been living in survival mode for too long, that orchestration is hijacked. And what should be a gentle descent into peace becomes a violent negotiation between systems that no longer speak the same language. This is what most people don't understand about sleep paralysis. They assume it is a sleep problem, something isolated to bedtime, a trick of the brain, a spooky episode, a glitch in the matrix. But what they fail to see is that sleep paralysis is not the war. It is the ceasefire breaking down. It is the moment your body refuses to follow orders. It is the collapsing of protocols that are only sustainable in peacetime, protocols like trust, release, and surrender. And when these things are absent, the body does not rest. It simulates rest, it imitates it, it performs it in broken fragments. REM sleep, the stage in which most vivid dreaming occurs, is where your body naturally paralyzes itself to prevent movement during imagined activity. This paralysis is controlled, functional, protective. But when the mind refuses to fully enter REM, when it keeps one foot in the waking world, scanning for threats, looping through thoughts, reviewing past pain, the REM state cannot stabilize. It fractures, it malfunctions. You wake into a body that is biologically frozen, with a mind that is emotionally inflamed, and this is not random. It is the direct consequence of a mind that has been conditioned to associate stillness with pain, darkness with threat, and rest with vulnerability. For some, this conditioning comes from trauma, experiences that taught the brain that the world is unsafe, that alertness equals survival, and that any lapse in awareness can result in harm. For others, the conditioning comes slowly, over years of chronic stress, social pressure, unprocessed grief, or emotional neglect. It doesn't matter how it formed. What matters is that the mind now believes sleep is dangerous. And once that belief is hardwired, the very process of trying to sleep becomes a battleground. So now, instead of rest, you get ambush. You lie down, and the body begins to shut down systems. Your heart rate slows, your breath deepens, but your mind resists. It thinks of conversations, regrets, things left undone, fears of failure, reminders of shame. Your thoughts become rapid-fire bullets tearing through the quiet like machine gun rounds. The body tries to drop deeper into muscle atonia, into dream state. But the mind keeps sending emergency signals, and eventually you slip between states. Not fully asleep, not fully awake, completely vulnerable, and completely unprotected. This is where sleep paralysis lives. This is its nest, and this is where your body tries to resolve a conflict your conscious mind refuses to face. The war between your need to survive and your need to heal. Because healing requires you to stop running. It requires you to sit in the discomfort, to feel it, to name it, to stop pretending you're fine. And that, for most people, is more terrifying than any shadow they might see in the corner of the room. So the war continues, and the battlefield becomes internal. You may not feel it during the day. You may perform, you may smile, you may hold your posture like nothing is wrong. But your body knows, your brain knows. It has been tracking the damage. It has been compensating for years. And when you lie down at night, stripped of distractions, stripped of performance, stripped of everyone else's expectations, the system tries to purge. It tries to reset. And it fails, because you won't let it. Because the moment your body begins to surrender, your mind pulls you back, afraid of what might come up in the silence. And that silence, that stillness, that void, it fills with images, with shadows, with paralysis, with the sensation that something is holding you down, choking you, watching you, that something is not a demon. It is the accumulation of everything you never addressed. It is the weight of grief unfelt, the anger never expressed, the pain never validated, the identity never embraced. Your paralysis is not just physical, it is psychological, emotional, existential. You're not just stuck in your body, you're stuck in your life. And the paralysis is your brain's way of showing you that. With no words, just stillness, just pressure, just fear. People think healing starts with therapy or medication or positive affirmations, but often it starts with the moment you recognize that your mind is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to survive. It is doing what it knows how to do. It has been fighting for years, and the paralyzing sleep you fear is just your mind's desperate attempt to get you to stop running, to stop hiding, to stop pretending you don't need help. This is why you wake up screaming without a sound. This is why you lie still, wide-eyed, feeling like death has entered the room. It's not death, it's not possession, it's confrontation. Your internal world is collapsing under the weight of its own suppression, and sleep is no longer strong enough to hold the pieces together, so it fractures, it glitches. And in the darkness of that broken space, you finally meet the version of yourself you've been avoiding. The scared child, the overburdened adult, the fractured soul, the one begging for rest, not just in body, but in mind. And until you hear it, until you respond, sleep will never be safe again. There is a moment in every episode of sleep paralysis where the fear stops being abstract. It takes form. At first, it's just pressure. A dense weight on the chest, a heaviness behind the eyes, a presence you can't see but feel in every molecule of the room. And then it appears, the shape in the corner, the shadow by the door, the silhouette that wasn't there a second ago but now refuses to leave. Your eyes, barely open, try to focus. Your brain, alert but helpless, screams that it's not real. But everything in you, every hair standing, every nerve tightened, every shiver crawling up your spine, tells you it is. This is where the experience fractures the boundaries of science and emotion. Because even after it's over, even after you wake up fully breathing hard, heart racing, light on, body back in motion, the feeling lingers. The certainty that you saw something, that you weren't alone. And it's not just terror that stays, it's the unshakable recognition. You knew that figure, not in name or face, but in essence. You've felt that weight before, not in sleep but in life, not in the corner of your room but in the parts of yourself you never turned to face. The shadow people, as they're commonly called, are not random hallucinations. They are not mere side effects of REM disturbance. They are representations, projected fragments of the subconscious finally given a screen to play on. When the mind is stripped of control and the body rendered still, the barriers fall. And what lives beneath the surface rises. Your brain, even in paralysis, is still creating, still interpreting, still assigning meaning to sensory input. But in this altered state, caught between waking and dreaming, the filter is gone. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought and executive control, is subdued. The amygdala, raw and primal, is in charge. The memories you suppressed, the emotions you buried, the fears you silenced, they now have form. They now have presence. That shape you see isn't just fear. It's your fear. The specific texture of your anxiety, the silhouette of your unresolved grief, the embodiment of the judgment you carry from someone you could never confront. The mind is not just afraid of monsters. It creates them based on the emotional content it cannot express through language. And in sleep paralysis, those creations are given a spotlight they never had during the day. Think about it. Why do so many people see the same thing? The shadow man, the figure standing at the foot of the bed, the presence watching, breathing, waiting, because these are universal symbols. Archetypes embedded in the collective unconscious, ancient emotional signatures tied to powerlessness, vulnerability, the threat of death, abandonment, betrayal. We don't just fear the dark because we can't see. We fear what we project into the dark, and in the stillness of paralysis, the projector is turned on at full volume. But it goes deeper. Because the subconscious doesn't just reveal what you're afraid of, it reveals how you're afraid. The shape changes based on your wounds. Someone abused may see the shadow as towering and aggressive. Someone neglected may see it as distant, but always watching. Someone grieving may see the outline of a familiar face, twisted by sorrow. These images are not hallucinations. They're metaphors, rendered by a mind desperate to communicate through the only medium left, sensory terror. And you cannot run, you cannot scream, you cannot blink it away, because it's not coming from outside you, it's coming from within. And in the dark silence of that paralysis, it is the only voice speaking. The body lies paralyzed because the mind refuses to listen when awake. So it speaks in symbols, in shadows, in stillness. In fear so specific it becomes art. You may think this is supernatural, and in a way it is, because there is nothing more supernatural than being forced to meet the parts of yourself you've spent your whole life avoiding. The shadow in the room is not a demon. It is the echo of every time you betrayed your own instincts. It is the outline of guilt for what you never said. It is the mirror of the self you abandoned to survive. Carl Jung called this the shadow self, the unconscious part of the personality that contains everything we refuse to acknowledge. Not because it's evil, but because it's painful. And in the paralysis of sleep, where defenses are stripped and awareness remains, that shadow walks in. It doesn't knock, it doesn't wait. It stands still, breathing, until you are forced to feel its weight. And that's what most people miss. The fear isn't just of what you see, it's of what it means, of what it says about you, of the possibility that this thing, this figure, this presence isn't separate, that it's not a visitor, that it is you trying to come home. We live in a world that teaches us to cut off what hurts, to repress, to distract, to label uncomfortable truths as weakness or madness. So we push down the sadness, the rage, the fear. We silence the shame. We numb the longing. We become masters at fragmentation, dividing our lives into acceptable and unacceptable parts. But the mind remembers. The body stores. And when we lie down to sleep, when the conscious narrative dissolves, the exiled parts come knocking. Sleep paralysis is not possession. It's confrontation. It's integration trying to happen through horror. It's your subconscious holding up a mirror so raw, so unfiltered, that all you can do is lie there and absorb the truth you've refused to see in daylight. The illusion of the shadow is not the problem. The belief that you can continue ignoring it is, because if it has shown itself once, it will show itself again, louder, closer, more vivid, until you don't just see it, until you recognize it, until you own it, and only then, when the weight is no longer seen as threat but as message, will the paralysis begin to shift, because your mind does not want to torture you, it wants to heal. It wants to integrate. But if you keep running, it will find you in the only space where you can't run anymore. The silence of your body, the darkness of your room, the thin space between wakefulness and surrender. And there, in that still, breathless moment, your shadow will speak. And the question will not be, is it real? The question will be, are you ready to listen? There is a myth we are taught very early, the idea that pain, once forgotten, disappears, that the body heals in silence, that the mind, through time or distraction, simply erases what it cannot bear to carry. But this myth is not only false, it's dangerous. Because the truth is, the body never forgets. It records, it memorizes, it preserves every unprocessed emotion, every moment of helplessness, every trauma that was never allowed to be spoken. It doesn't vanish. It lodges itself deeper. It stops living in your memories and begins living in your tissues. And eventually, it starts to speak through your sleep. You might think that your paralyzed body is the problem, that the moment you wake and cannot move, that's where the story begins. But the truth is, the story was written years ago. Long before that night, long before that bedroom, long before the darkness became unbearable. That paralysis is not the beginning, it's the consequence. It is the end result of years of emotional avoidance, nervous system strain, and buried grief that never had permission to surface in daylight. There's a reason so many people who suffer from sleep paralysis also suffer from unresolved trauma. The connection is not symbolic, it's biological. Trauma doesn't live in your memory the way stories do. It lives in your body the way scars do, sometimes invisible but always there. The racing heart, the shallow breath, the tight jaw, the way your body reacts to tone of voice, a sudden silence, a closed door. These are not random reactions. They are muscle memory. They are the body's way of replaying an experience it never got to complete. You see, the nervous system is designed to respond to threat with action, fight, flight, freeze. These are not psychological choices, they are physiological imperatives. But when we're young, powerless, emotionally trapped or physically restrained, we often can't fight, we can't flee, so we freeze. And then we move on. At least we try to. We go back to school, to work, to normalcy, but the body never finished the loop, and what doesn't complete repeats. This is why trauma doesn't just go away, it waits. It waits for the body to be still, for the distractions to fade, for the mind to lower its defenses. And in the dead silence of the night, when the only thing left is breath and memory, it resurfaces, not as thought, but as sensation. It returns in the form of pressure on the chest, a sudden jolt awake, a paralyzed body locked in a moment that feels like death. But what you're actually experiencing is an emotional memory being expressed physically. Sleep paralysis in this context is not just the malfunction of REM sleep. It is a reenactment. The body returns to the state of freeze, the same freeze you went through when you were a child and couldn't speak, when you were overwhelmed and no one saw, when you were terrified and told to calm down, when the trauma didn't end. It just got buried under years of silence and coping mechanisms. In those moments, your body became the vault. And now, decades later, it still holds the key. The sensation of being watched during sleep paralysis, the inability to scream, the terror that fills your chest like smoke. These are not random elements. They are symbolic reenactments of the moments in your life where you were unseen, unheard, and utterly vulnerable. They are flashbacks with no image, memories with no words, just the raw somatic imprint of something that never had closure. And here's the cruel part. Your logical mind might not even remember the original source. You may not have clear memories of abuse, of loss, of trauma, but the body doesn't need a narrative. It only needs experience. And when it cannot find release during the day, it forces release at night. Not with intention, but with desperation. Because the system is overflowing, the vault is cracking, the body is begging to be heard. That's why therapy often begins in the body, not in the story, not in the intellect, but in the breath, in the posture, in the held tension, in the ways you grip the steering wheel, the way you flinch when someone raises their voice, the way you freeze when you're overwhelmed. These are the daily rituals of unresolved pain, and they don't disappear when you lie down. They follow you into the night. They become the figures in the corner, the pressure in your chest, the silent screams stuck in your throat. People often ask, why does this happen when I'm sleeping? Why not during the day? But that's the point. During the day you have shields, you have roles, you have distractions. You don't give your system space to release, so it waits. Until the house is quiet, the lights are off, the phone is down, until you're still enough to finally feel what you've trained yourself not to, and the body, now free of resistance, begins to speak. But the language is terrifying, because you never learned how to hear it. You were taught to fear discomfort, to escape pain, to numb sensation, so when the body tells the truth, you panic. You label it dysfunction, you call it demonic, you try to wake up. But waking won't save you, because the wound is still there when you open your eyes. Sleep paralysis is not just the failure of your muscles to respond. It's the failure of your system to process what it never had space to. It is not just paralysis, it's compression. It's emotional compression that finally breaks into the physical. And when it does, it doesn't ask permission. It floods you. The question now is not, how do I stop it? The question is, what is my body trying to tell me? What experience has been frozen inside me so long that my only path to release is through paralysis? What part of myself did I abandon that now stands in the shadows at night, begging to be seen again? Healing this doesn't come from resisting the paralysis. It comes from honoring the memory it's trying to deliver, not through fear, but through presence, through breath, through feeling, through learning the vocabulary of your own body, not to silence it, but to finally understand what it's been carrying. Because the body doesn't lie. It holds what the mind won't. And if your sleep is haunted, it's not because you're cursed. It's because you're full of unspoken truths, full of unfinished loops, full of survival that never became safety. And now, your body wants to be free. There's a particular silence that only exists at night, not the silence of a quiet room or a muted phone, but the silence that comes when the world stops demanding things from you, when no one's texting, when the notifications fade, when the roles you play all day, the productive one, the strong one, the indifferent one, are momentarily suspended, and all that remains is you. Not the version you show, not the identity you project, but the raw, pulsing core of yourself, the one you don't really know what to do with. And in that space, the void opens. Not suddenly, not dramatically. The void doesn't arrive like a scream. It settles like fog, slowly, thickly, invisibly. You lie down expecting rest, or at least hoping for distraction through exhaustion. But your body, while heavy, doesn't relax. Your mind, while tired, doesn't quiet. And underneath the surface, deeper than breath, deeper than muscle, something begins to stir. It's not a thought, it's not a memory, it's an ache, an emptiness, a sense that something is missing, something fundamental, but you can't name it. You just feel it, and once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. This is the emotional void, the black hole at the center of the soul that never healed. It's not depression in the clinical sense, it's not anxiety in the textbook sense, it's deeper, it's older. It's the wound of disconnection, the long-term absence of emotional nourishment, the loneliness that didn't come from being alone, but from never being truly seen, from moving through life with a mask so tight you forgot what your own face looks like beneath it. And the tragedy is, during the day, you don't notice. You're busy, you're useful, you're functional. But at night, the lie can't hold. The body remembers. The mind slows. And in the absence of external chaos, the internal one emerges. The void is not silent, it whispers. It whispers doubts, it whispers memories, it whispers fears you thought you'd buried. And as the hours stretch on, that whisper becomes unbearable. It presses into your chest. It winds itself around your neck. It fills your stomach with a weight that food can't explain. And you think you're just tired. You think you need to scroll. You think you need noise. But what you really need, and don't know how to give yourself, is connection, real connection, to someone, to something, but especially to yourself. And because that connection hasn't been cultivated, maybe for years, maybe for decades, your nervous system doesn't know how to downshift. Your brain doesn't know how to feel safe without external input. So it doesn't shut down. It scans, it replays, it loops, it fixates. And eventually, even as your body slips towards sleep, your mind refuses. It holds the wheel. It resists the descent. And when sleep finally comes, it's not restorative. It's fractured. It's chaotic. It's haunted. This is why the emotional void is so destructive at night, not because it's stronger, but because you're finally still enough to feel it. All day you've been managing, performing, distracting, avoiding. You're a master of repression, but repression is expensive. It doesn't delete the pain, it delays it, and what's delayed always returns. It returns when the lights are off, when the bed creaks, when the breath deepens and the room fades, and suddenly your own mind is louder than the world ever was. That's when the void explodes. Not with noise, but with absence, with the terrifying sense that nothing you do matters, that you are both too much and never enough, that no one knows the real you, and worse, that maybe you don't either. These aren't just passing thoughts. They're emotional signatures, imprints left by years of disconnection, from parents who didn't know how to see you, from partners who used your body but ignored your soul, from systems that rewarded you for silence and punished you for vulnerability. The void is not created in a single moment. It is built brick by brick, every time you needed love and received performance, every time you needed rest and received pressure, every time you needed truth and received dismissal. And now, lying there in the dark with no audience, no mask, no momentum, the void takes center stage, and your body responds. The breath shallows, the muscles tense, the heart accelerates, because the mind perceives this emptiness as threat. Your nervous system interprets emotional starvation the same way it interprets danger, as a reason to activate the survival response. And once that switch is flipped, sleep becomes unsafe. You lie there, half sleeping, half scanning. You drift, you jolt, you freeze, and eventually you wake up unable to move. You wake up inside the very paralysis your own mind created to keep you from going deeper into the void. Because that's the paradox. You need to feel to heal, but feeling has always been unsafe. So your system shuts it down, not gently, violently. It paralyzes you, not because it's broken, but because it believes you'll die if you feel this much pain all at once. It believes that silence will consume you, that darkness will erase you, and in a twisted way it's protecting you from yourself, from the emptiness you carry like a second skin, from the truth that keeps whispering every single night. You are starving emotionally, and you've forgotten how to feed yourself. But the body knows. It remembers how to reach for warmth, how to seek safety, how to slow. It's waiting for you to stop pretending that productivity is enough, that sex is intimacy, that followers are love. It's waiting for you to sit, truly sit with yourself, without distraction, without blame, without armor. And until you do, it will keep sending signals. It will keep interrupting your sleep. It will keep pressing the pain into your lungs until you wake up choking on silence. Because the emotional void is not passive. It's not a hole you fall into. It's a pressure that builds until something breaks. And if it doesn't break during the day, it will break at night. In your chest, in your dreams, in the corners of your room when you can't move, can't scream, can't breathe. That is the voice of your own soul, pounding on the inside of your ribcage, asking why you've been gone for so long. And the answer can't be productivity, can't be distraction, can't be hustle. The answer has to be presence, because presence fills what noise never could. And until you learn to sit with the silence, until you stop fearing the void and start listening to what it holds, the paralysis won't leave. Not because it hates you, but because it's the only thing that knows how to say, you need more than this. You were built for more than this, and you are still waiting for your own return. You think you just sleep badly. You tell people you're a light sleeper, that you've always had trouble winding down, that your mind races sometimes, especially at night, especially when things are quiet. You joke about being an overthinker, like it's just another personality trait, a quirky flaw you've learned to tolerate. You call it insomnia. You call it restlessness. You call it anything but what it actually is. Chronic anxiety that has wrapped itself so tightly around your nervous system that you can no longer tell the difference between normal tiredness and a body living in a state of ongoing, silent emergency. And the scariest part is, you've adapted to it, because anxiety doesn't always look like panic attacks or hyperventilation. Sometimes it looks like lying in bed for 3 hours, replaying a conversation you had 6 days ago. Sometimes it looks like constantly checking the time, counting how many hours of sleep you'll get if you fall asleep right now. Sometimes it looks like scrolling endlessly at midnight because your mind is too loud and the silence feels like a threat. And eventually, that mental noise becomes background static, not because it's gone, but because it's always there. So your brain stops registering it as abnormal. It becomes your baseline. And you begin calling that state normal sleep. But it's not sleep, it's shutdown. Your body collapses from exhaustion, not ease. You don't rest, you black out. You don't dream, you replay. Your sleep becomes fragmented, broken into pieces too small to heal you. And when you wake, you don't feel restored. You feel heavier, foggy, like you've spent the night running marathons inside your own head, because that's exactly what you've done. This is chronic anxiety, not the kind you notice, the kind that becomes so familiar it goes invisible. It lives in your muscles, it lives in your breath, it lives in the rituals you perform every night before you lie down, the ones that look like routines but are actually defenses. The door you double-check, the position you always sleep in, the thoughts you distract yourself from because you know where they lead if you follow them too far. And over time, your brain learns that sleep is dangerous, not because it is, but because it requires surrender. And anxiety hates surrender. It is built to anticipate, to analyze, to rehearse disaster, and memorize all the ways you might fall apart tomorrow. Anxiety does not care if you need rest. It only cares that you survive. And when survival becomes the dominant setting, everything else, connection, rest, peace, dreaming, becomes a luxury your nervous system can't afford. So when you lie down at night, the real battle begins. You feel it in the way your chest tightens, even though the room is quiet. You feel it in the way your thoughts become more chaotic the darker it gets. You feel it in the moment you almost relax, and then your brain yanks you back because what if you forgot something? What if tomorrow breaks you? What if you're not safe? Your body wants to rest, your mind wants to scan, and the scan always wins, until one night your system glitches, not because it's failing, but because it can't carry this state forever. And so it does what anxiety always does when it's maxed out. It freezes. You wake up, half-conscious, body locked, breath shallow, chest burning. You can't move. You can't speak. And in the deepest part of your brain, the one that still believes the world is dangerous even in sleep, a scream builds, but no sound comes, because the system has shut down, not out of peace, but out of exhaustion. This is sleep paralysis through the lens of anxiety. It's not a random occurrence. It's not a strange one-off event. It's the inevitable crash after years of running on threat detection mode. It's the physiological expression of an emotional system that's been redlining without pause. And now, finally, The engine has seized. You didn't brake. You burned out. And this is how your body lets you know. But of course you don't make the connection. You wake up confused, terrified, maybe even ashamed. You search, "Why can't I move when I wake up?" on your phone, half laughing, half panicking. You read a few medical terms, you close the tab, and you try to forget. Because the idea that your own anxiety could paralyze you is too much. So you go back to calling it bad sleep. You tell yourself it was just stress, and you move on until it happens again. And again, and again, each time more vivid, each time more visceral, each time harder to ignore. And eventually, if you're brave enough to stop pretending, you'll start to see the pattern. The way your body tenses as the sun sets. The way your thoughts sharpen the moment the distractions stop. The way you feel most alive, not when you're present, but when you're alert, hyper-alert, like something terrible might happen at any second, because that's what chronic anxiety is. It's not drama. It's not fear of public speaking or awkward conversations. It's the deep, constant belief that something is wrong and that you are the one who has to fix it, even if you don't know what it is, even if it doesn't exist. The feeling stays, the tightness stays, the vigilance stays, and eventually it bleeds into your sleep, because there is no off switch, not anymore, and that's where the healing has to begin, not with sleep, but with safety. Your mind cannot rest if it does not feel safe. Your body cannot release if it does not feel seen. And your nervous system cannot reset if it still believes it has to defend itself against everything, including your own emotions. You cannot force yourself to sleep when your whole being believes you are in danger. You cannot rest in a world you don't trust. You cannot breathe deeply when your brain is rehearsing every way you might fall apart. So what do? You stop pretending that anxiety is about being nervous. You stop calling it stress. You stop minimizing it. You start seeing it for what it is, a full-body, full-mind state of permanent alarm. You learn to find safety in the stillness. You train your body to downshift. You unlearn the belief that being hyper-aware is the only way to stay alive. And slowly, you begin to introduce peace not as a reward, but as a requirement. Because sleep is not a privilege, it is a need, and anxiety is not a personality. It is a survival response, screaming for help. And if that scream is now coming through your dreams, through your paralysis, through your inability to breathe at night, it's not because you're broken, it's because your body is begging for a new way to live. Most people think of sleep as something separate, a disconnected system that operates independently of their emotional life. They see it as a routine, a mechanical necessity, something the body just does when it's tired enough. But sleep is not a shut-off switch. It's not just unconsciousness. It's a mirror, and it's the most brutally honest one you have. Because while you can lie to your therapist, lie to your partner, lie to your boss, even lie to yourself, your sleep never lies. Your dreams, your disturbances, your insomnia, your paralyzing moments in the night, they are all reflections of your inner state. They are the language your mind uses when you're too proud, too distracted, too numb, or too afraid to hear the truth during the day. You may not remember your dreams. You may wake up and shrug off the weight in your chest as nothing. You may brush off the experience of waking up frozen and terrified as just stress. But your nervous system doesn't deal in metaphors. It deals in signals, in sensations, in symptoms. And when your mental health begins to crack, it doesn't always start with tears or breakdowns. Sometimes it starts with dreams that spiral, sleep that evades you, exhaustion that makes no sense, and quiet nights that feel like war zones. Because sleep is where the mind stops performing. It's where the mask comes off. It's where the part of you that can't speak finally starts to scream. Not in words, but in symbols, in nightmares, in paralysis, in the inability to wake up from something that feels like death, but is really your truth, finally breaking through. You think you're just tired, but you're not. You're emotionally malnourished. You're mentally overworked. You've been carrying pressure that your system was never built to sustain. You've normalized pain, rebranded burnout as ambition, dressed up avoidance as independence. But at night, when there's nothing left to distract you, when it's just you, your body, your breath, and the cold silence, there is no performance left to give. And that's when the mirror turns on. Your dreams reveal what you repress, your interruptions reflect what you fear, your insomnia reveals what you can't let go of. And your sleep paralysis, that brutal, suffocating, helpless moment where your body lies frozen and your mind spirals into terror, that is the rawest reflection of your unresolved inner life. It's your psyche cornered. It's your emotional system begging you to pay attention to what you've buried beneath productivity, perfectionism, and pride. Because your mental health doesn't just fall apart during obvious moments. It erodes slowly, silently, invisibly. It creeps in through your thoughts. It eats away at your ability to concentrate. It pulls the joy out of things you used to love, and then it seeps into your sleep, turning rest into rehearsal, turning the act of lying down into a war your body no longer knows how to win. You might think your sleep is random, that the nights you can't breathe are just coincidences, that waking up in fear is just something your brain does sometimes. But what if it isn't? What if that terror has shape because your fear has roots? What if the paralysis is only happening because your body is mimicking how emotionally paralyzed you are in your real life? What if your insomnia is not a disorder but a protest, your system screaming that it refuses to surrender into stillness because stillness is where the pain begins to surface? Sleep is not separate from your story. It is where your story finishes the sentences you never let yourself say out loud. It is where your nervous system processes the emotional debts you didn't pay during the day. And if that system is overloaded, if your mental health is deteriorating silently, your sleep will be the first to let you know. But here's the paradox. Most people don't listen. They treat sleep issues like isolated glitches. They buy blackout curtains, they change mattresses, they download apps, they take supplements, all of which may help for a while, but none of which address the root. Because the root isn't the room, it's you. It's what you carry into bed with you, not physically, emotionally. The shame, the guilt, the anxiety, the self-loathing, the grief you never grieved, the identity you never owned, the boundaries you never learned to hold, the trauma you minimized so well you almost believed it never happened, until you wake up sweating, frozen, breathless, and suddenly it's all there. Your sleep knows. It knows where the cracks are. And if you keep ignoring those cracks, they become fractures. If you keep forcing yourself to function while broken, the body eventually rebels, not with dramatic collapse, but with subtle sabotage. With fatigue you can't explain, with dreams that terrify you, with long nights that stretch forever, with mornings that start with dread instead of renewal, and eventually with moments where you wake up and your body doesn't move. Your chest is heavy, your limbs betray you, your voice is trapped, your eyes see something you can't explain. You call it sleep paralysis, but it's not just that, it's your mental health made physical. It's the emotional pain you buried so deep it took over your nervous system. It's your brain showing you what your pride refuses to admit. You are not okay. And that's not weakness. That's truth. That's the truth your sleep reflects every single night, whether you're ready to see it or not. So what now? You begin by seeing sleep not as a mechanical function, but as a window, as a mirror, as a message. You start asking, what does my restlessness say about my anxiety? What do my dreams say about my fear? What does my paralysis say about my sense of helplessness in real life? You start realizing that bad sleep is often just a good signal from a system that's trying to wake you up, not from sleep, but from denial. And slowly, with that awareness, you stop fighting the signals. You stop resisting what your body is showing you. You start allowing yourself to feel what you were never taught to feel. You start giving your nervous system permission to relax, not because everything is perfect, but because you're finally creating a space where pain can be felt without shame, where fear can exist without being silenced, and where stillness no longer feels like death. Because sleep is not the absence of consciousness, it's the rehearsal of emotional truth. And the way you sleep is the way you live. And if your nights are chaotic, disjointed, paralyzing, maybe your days are too. You just haven't stopped long enough to notice. Until now. There comes a point where the mind stops listening. Not out of ignorance, but out of strategy. It learns to quiet the signals. It mutes the alarms. It filters out the tension in your chest, the shallow breath, the ache behind your eyes, because if it didn't, you wouldn't be able to function. And so, little by little, the system learns to numb, to adapt, to overperform, to carry on. But the body never forgets. The body doesn't have the luxury of denial. It stores everything. Every panic suppressed, every sadness swallowed, every moment you told yourself it's nothing. And when the mind stays silent for too long, the body screams, not with words, with symptoms, with exhaustion that sleep can't fix, with tension that massage can't loosen, with pain that doctors can't explain, with sleep that feels more like a shutdown than a recovery, and eventually with paralysis. The kind that wakes you up in the middle of the night, drenched in adrenaline, stuck in your own skin, unable to move, unable to speak, staring into the darkness while something inside you begs to be released. That scream is not random. It is the pressure of everything you didn't say, everything you didn't feel, everything your mind suppressed so that you could stay composed, so that you could keep working, so that no one would know you were breaking. It is rage, sadness, terror, shame, not just emotional states, but biological realities stored in your tissues, in your nervous system, in the chemical soup of stress hormones flooding your body every time you pretend you're fine. And you've pretended for so long because the world taught you that breaking down is weakness, that showing emotion is drama, that being tired is laziness, that being still is being unproductive, and so you taught yourself to override the signals, to push through the migraines, to dismiss the stomach knots, to numb the clenched jaw, the aching back, the rapid heartbeat, until the signals became the norm, until the dysfunction became your baseline, until the only thing that felt strange was rest. But rest is not the problem. It's what happens in rest that terrifies you, because in rest, the mind loses control. And when the mind loses control, the body starts telling the truth. That truth arrives in waves. It's not poetic, it's physical. It's lying in bed, unable to exhale fully because your diaphragm is too tight from years of bracing for impact. It's waking up multiple times a night because your brain is still scanning for threat even in sleep. It's flinching at sounds, jumping at shadows, feeling like your skin is too tight. And when the body can no longer tolerate the suppression, it does the only thing left. It shuts down motor function entirely. It forces stillness, not as relaxation, but as revolt. That's sleep paralysis. It's not just a dream disorder, it's a full-body uprising. Your body is staging a protest against your silence, against the parts of you that stopped feeling, against the mind that keeps performing while everything inside is burning. It's a scream with no voice, because the voice was silenced a long time ago. Maybe as a child, maybe after trauma, maybe after years of emotional neglect. Doesn't matter. What matters is that now your body is carrying what your mind won't even name. And here's the truth you don't want to admit. It's not just happening at night. You think your mind is fine because you can still go to work, because you laugh at jokes, because you post photos, because you still function. But functioning is not healing. Performing is not feeling. And silence is not peace. You've trained your mind to dissociate, to fragment, to rationalize everything, but your body kept score. And now it's speaking in a language you can't ignore. Sleep paralysis is not punishment, it's not random, it's not a weird thing that just happens. It is a direct message from the deepest part of your nervous system. It's your body saying, I can't carry this anymore. It's your nervous system hitting the emergency brake. It's your emotional life manifesting through biology, because biology never lies. And you don't know how to respond, because all you've been taught is to fix, to solve, to perform. But the body doesn't need fixing. It needs feeling. It needs validation. It needs breath. It needs you to stop pretending that you're okay just because nothing's exploded yet. Because things are exploding, just internally, quietly, night after night, until one day you wake up unable to move. And the panic that fills you is not just about being paralyzed. It's about knowing that something deep inside you has been screaming for years, and you've never once stopped to listen. But now, you have to. Because the scream is louder than ever. It's in your breath, in your chest, in your dreams, in the moments where your body freezes and your mind spins into terror. You call it sleep paralysis, but it's your nervous system in revolt. It's your emotional system in crisis. It's your body no longer able to suppress what the mind refuses to process. And the solution is not to fight the body. It's to make peace with the silence, to let the body feel, to let the emotions come, to stop suppressing, to stop silencing, to finally sit still, not because you're forced, but because you're ready to listen, ready to reconnect, ready to feel what you've locked away for too long, because the body won't stop screaming, not until you answer. And when you do, you'll realize the paralysis wasn't there to punish you, it was there to wake you up. There is a cost to pretending, a cost to delaying, avoiding, minimizing, repressing. You might not see it at first, because it doesn't announce itself with sirens. It arrives slowly, subtly, wrapped in excuses and disguised as strength. You function, you show up, you say you're fine, you keep pushing, you keep suppressing. And for a while, the world rewards you for it. They call you resilient, dependable, stoic, but underneath the surface of that praise, something else is happening. Something corrosive, something dangerous. Because the longer you ignore the signals, the more your system begins to rot from within. Sleep paralysis is not the problem. It's the proof. It's the visible evidence that something invisible has been screaming inside you for longer than you've been willing to admit. And if you treat it as just a sleep glitch, a neurological fluke, a quirk of brain chemistry, you miss the message entirely, because no system locks down this violently without a reason. No body freezes in terror unless it's responding to something that feels deep down like survival. But you ignore it. You wake up terrified, breathless, unable to move, and you brush it off as a nightmare. You joke about it. You turn it into a story. You look it up on a website, read 2 paragraphs, close the tab, and then you go back to your routine. You drink your coffee. You go to work. You keep producing, you stay distracted, you tell yourself it's nothing, that it'll pass. But it doesn't pass. It builds. Because the problem isn't the paralysis, the problem is everything that led to it. The trauma you minimized, the burnout you normalized, the emotional void you called independence, the chronic anxiety you called drive, the shame you buried so deep you forgot what it even felt like to breathe without bracing. These things don't go away because you don't talk about them. They don't dissolve because you're busy. They wait. And when they can't wait any longer, they explode in the only place you can't run from, your sleep. This is the part no one wants to hear. You're not just tired, you're fragmented. You're not just having sleep issues. Your nervous system is in crisis. You've spent years teaching your mind to shut up, to fall in line, to keep going. But your body was never built for constant suppression. And now it's done being quiet. Now it's paralyzing you. Now it's taking control. Not because it wants to punish you, but because it wants you to stop. And if you don't, the symptoms escalate. The sleep gets worse. The paralysis becomes more vivid. The pressure in your chest becomes daytime panic. The exhaustion becomes existential. The dreams become indistinguishable from flashbacks. The disconnect you once relied on to survive turns into a prison you can't escape. Even when you're alone, even when you're unconscious, even when you're supposed to be resting. And here's the most brutal part. The more you ignore it, the more functional you appear on the outside. You'll keep hitting deadlines. You'll keep smiling at people. You'll keep playing your role, while internally your system deteriorates, quietly, consistently, until you don't know who you are without the exhaustion, until you don't recognize peace because it feels foreign, until silence becomes terrifying, until stillness feels like death. Because to the person living in chronic suppression, rest doesn't feel like relief. It feels like vulnerability. And that's why you fear sleep. That's why you fear surrender. That's why you wake up paralyzed, because in that split second between waking and dreaming, you are completely exposed. And your system reacts like it's under attack, not because you're crazy, not because you're broken, but because you never learned how to be still without being afraid. And ignoring that is dangerous. Because your body can only carry what your mind refuses to face for so long. And sleep paralysis is not the worst-case scenario. It's the warning. It's your nervous system tapping the brakes before everything collapses. It's your body begging you to notice the fire before it consumes the house. So what do? You stop calling it just a dream. You stop calling it just stress. You start naming what's real. You start asking, what is this paralysis trying to show me? What is my system holding that I haven't touched in years? What do I need to feel and finally allow so that my body doesn't have to keep screaming for me? You go inward, you slow down, you get honest. Not once, not on weekends. Consistently, you learn to feel before you collapse. You learn to listen before the shutdown. You learn to breathe before the freeze. You learn that the path out of paralysis is not about fighting the body. It's about making peace with the parts of yourself that never got the chance to speak. Because if you don't, if you keep pretending, if you keep numbing, then the body will keep finding louder ways to get your attention. And the next time you wake up, unable to move, unable to scream, heart pounding, shadows creeping at the edge of your vision, maybe you'll finally understand. This wasn't about demons. This was about you. About the parts of you that were silenced, fractured, hidden. About the emotional truths you refused to acknowledge. And about the version of you that's been begging night after night for one thing only: to be heard. You came here searching for answers about why you wake up paralyzed, why your sleep betrays you, why the silence of the night becomes a battlefield you never chose. But now, maybe you see, the paralysis was never the enemy. It was a mirror, a signal, a scream from the deepest part of you, not the part that performs or smiles or functions, but the part that was silenced for years, the part that watched you disconnect, the part that never got to grieve, to rage, to speak, to ask for help, the part that your nervous system locked in a vault and labeled too much. But nothing stays buried forever. Sleep is where the truth finds you. It's where the mask dissolves. And when your emotional pain has been ignored for too long, when the weight of your own suppression becomes too much to carry, your body intervenes. It locks itself. It freezes. It paralyzes, not to torture you, but to protect you. Because you never learned to stop until something forced you. And now, it has. So maybe the real question is not how do I stop the paralysis? Maybe the question is, what do I need to feel, to face, to integrate, so that my body no longer needs to paralyze itself to survive my silence? Your sleep isn't broken, it's communicating. And until you listen, the message will keep arriving, in shadows, in stillness, in silence too loud to ignore. If your body is screaming while your mind stays silent, it's not dysfunction, it's survival. If your sleep is fractured, haunted, paralyzed, it's not random. It's a message, and the longer you ignore it, the louder it becomes. So if this voice reached you, deep down, beyond language, don't let it fade. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Come back whenever the silence gets too loud, because you were never meant to carry this alone, and now you don't have to.